Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Dialogue. I'm Taimur Shamil. The Indian atrocities in Kashmir continue. Over the years and recently for that matter, we have seen that the way pellet guns were used against women and children in Kashmir, innocent people were attacked in Kashmir, in Indian occupied Kashmir, and the curfew by the Indian forces, by the Indian government continues in Kashmir. This has been going on for the last 72 years. If the Indian government, through their atrocities, have not been able to suppress the Kashmiri spirit, they won't be able to do it now. And this resistance won't continue now and in future. And Pakistan stands with the people of Kashmir, with the people of Indian occupied Kashmir who are fighting for their basic rights, something that we all want, something that I want, something that you want, basic human rights to live with freedom, to live our life the way we want to live it. So they are asking for something very basic that the Indian government has not been giving to them. Interestingly, recently some 27 members of European Parliament were visiting the Indian occupied Kashmir. They were allowed to go there. That was rather a very staged visit by the Indian government. They took them there, and interestingly, most of these MPs were from the ultra far right of the European parties. Interestingly also that many of the MPs from the India have not been able to visit Indian occupied Kashmir. One of the US senators has not been able to visit Indian occupied Kashmir. So this is what is going on in Indian occupied Kashmir, and Pakistan protests all these measures taken by the Indian government. And certainly this is a big question for the international community when they talk about the universal liberal values, when they talk about human rights, when they talk about humanitarian crisis. This is actually what is happening in Indian occupied Kashmir at the moment. We are going to discuss about this, and also the way Pakistan has been going at times out of the way for improving its relations with all the neighboring countries in the region, especially when it comes to India. While this is going on, we want peace and stability in the region. Pakistan took an initiative. Pakistan is opening Kartarpur corridor, through which the Sikh pilgrims from India would be visiting the Kartarpur Gurdwara Sahib, Sikh site in Punjab, the birthplace of Guru Nanak, the founder of Sikhism. Sikh pilgrims will be coming today. They were visiting today, and this is a peace gesture taken by Pakistan to show that we want peace and stability. If people across the border want it, we want it. But any sort of misadventure, of course, would be responded in the same coin. We are joined by a special guest in the studios to discuss about Pakistan-India relations, to discuss about Kashmir primarily, and also the Kartarpur corridor, the initiative, peace initiative taken by Pakistan. Ms. Tasneem Aslam is a renowned senior diplomat from Pakistan Foreign Office, and she is an expert on Pakistan's foreign policy. Welcome to the show, Ms. Aslam. Our second guest is Mr. Hassan Akbar. He is the director of Jinnah Institute, public policy think tank based in Islamabad, and he is also an expert on Pakistan's national security affairs and also relations with India as well as Afghanistan. Welcome to the show, Mr. Akbar. Mr. Aslam, starting with Kashmir first of all, what is going on over there? I just mentioned in my introduction. Interestingly, the MPs, the European MPs who were visiting there, that was covered in the media. This visit staged by the Indian government, these optics are very strong and they have a message. How do you see them?
Well, first, nobody has been taken in by this gesture of BJP government, because those MPs are well known for their right-wing, anti-Islam, anti-immigrant views and radical views, and they are known as friends of BJP, RSS, Modi regime in Europe. So it was a ragtag group. It was not an EU parliamentary mission. These were the friends of Modi who were invited to go in, and it was planned in such a way to send a message to the international community that India has normalized everything, to in a way substantiate the BJP claims that everything is normal in Kashmir. And it turned out that generally streets were deserted, but they were people came out. Normally they are as a protest, they stay indoors, but they came out, they pelted stone, there were clashes. So it was again an act of defiance. So I don't think that visit has been, it has any credibility or it has sent that message. If you look at the social media, Western social media, Western media, newspapers, they came out very clearly that look, what kind of people did you gather and their backgrounds. Of course, they are well known for their views. So, this stunt didn't really work, and Kashmiris also sent a very clear signal that they will not be putting up a show for RSS dominated regime in Delhi.
Delhi. And Mr. Akbar, how do you see this? Do you see some kind of nexus that is perhaps coming up in the future of this far right? As Mr. Aslam just mentioned, they are well known already, these MPs. Going to India, of course, they have gone there with something in mind. There's clarity in mind that what they're going for, and the message that this visit would send internationally. Is there a nexus that you see of ultra far right at the moment going on, and what would be the future, let's say, if this continues?
Well, I think what's clear is that as Ambassador Aslam said, that the attempt to portray normalization in Indian occupied Kashmir has failed. There have been reports that this was orchestrated by the National Security Advisor of India because of the immense pressure, international pressure that the Indian government has been facing, from hearings in Congress to international media talking about the atrocities and the human rights abuses in Indian occupied Kashmir. What they have managed to do is that they have looked for people with which they have common cause. And these are also, like the government in India right now, are basically fascists or bigoted parliamentarians in the EU, who are not only anti-Islam, anti-immigrant, but also anti-Semite. And so there's been a lot of backlash. The EU has come out very clearly saying that this is not an official delegation. They did not have to give that statement. The reason that they gave that statement was to emphasize that this delegation did not represent the EU Parliament, and that this was taken in their personal capacity. This tour was taken in their personal capacity. Even then, the tour was very managed. They went to certain locations. It was all stage managed, and it replicates the kind of visuals, staged managed visuals, which we saw in the first few days after the August 5th decision, where we saw their national security advisor having food, etc., but with people who didn't know who he was. And later it was found out that the whole area had been cordoned off, and they had. So these kind of visuals are meant to portray a sense of normalcy, especially given how the narrative has run away from the Indian government, clearly in international fora. And Pakistan has very effectively brought up its case, not only at Congress, for example, or at international media outlets, but also in other multilateral forums, such as the Non-Aligned Movement, the NAM Summit, and others. The Inter-Parliamentary Union just happened a few days back, and the Pakistani delegates, parliamentarians there, very effectively raised the issue of Kashmir. So I think that in the face of continuous diplomatic setbacks,
right,
and people asking very serious questions from India about its actions in Kashmir, the Modi government is, instead of improving the conditions, instead of removing curfew, and instead of improving the living conditions and stopping the humanitarian crisis in Kashmir, has resorted to this kind of, a public stunt, you can say, or tactics, which are clearly going to fail. Other members of the EU Parliament have come out very strongly and spoken against the visit and spoken about Kashmir, what's happening in Indian occupied Kashmir. So even there it has backfired.
So should there be a condemnation, let's say, Mr. Aslam, from the Pakistani side? Because some people are of the view that nobody should take this visit lightly, because there is also a rise of ultra far right in Europe. We see that in France and Germany, for that matter, elsewhere in Europe. And this nexus can develop further, and they can pressurize perhaps Pakistan in the future, or they can change whatever they are changing in Kashmir, the demographics and the dynamics. Politically, this nexus can create a problem for the people of Kashmir. Do you see it that way?
Well, while these ultra right-wing parties have been gaining support and expanding their base in Europe, they are still not part of the mainstream politics. But because of immigrants and the economy of European countries, EU not doing that well, that sentiment against Muslims living in Europe, and then also the narrative that behind every terrorist attack there is a Muslim connection, and they somehow are seen as a threat to European values and European way of life and European prosperity. So at the public level also, because of the ignorance and the narrative that is being peddled by these parties, as well as some sections of the media, it is resonating. How long it will take to it to become completely mainstream and take over governments, that is to be seen. But as Hassan said, accompanied with this is also there's a rise of anti-Semitism in Europe, and that has to do, on the one hand, those human rights activists who see what has been happening in Palestine for decades. They are very vocal, and you know that European Parliament and parliaments of European countries have been very vocal about that. Also, again, the economic reasons and the dominance of one small group, there is resentment against Jews as well, that is increasing. And in Germany also you see that it's rising, and Germany is the main pillar in the European Union. And it is a matter of concern that in Germany that sentiment is spreading now. It is gaining more ground. In the long run, if BJP and RSS ideology and these ideologies are going to form some kind of coalition, that is not likely, because it is more government to government.
Right.
And if you look at European governments, while the media and human rights activists have been very vocal about Kashmir, governments, European governments or Western governments generally, have not taken a strong position. Just imagine if a fraction of what is happening in IOK was taking place in any Muslim country. You would see, take the example of Hong Kong. Hong Kong is a legitimate part of China, but how that movement is now blatantly being sponsored, that from some basic economic grievances, now it has blown into, is being turned into a separatist movement. So you see that governments also put their weight behind such actions. So not at the political party level or these individual ultra right wing fascist level, but we should be more concerned about the hypocrisy and duplicity of Western governments.
And this duplicity, Hassan, interestingly, Prime Minister Imran Khan, when he went to United Nations General Assembly, when he was addressing General Assembly, in the end he talked about this duplicity, that would it be about the economic financial gains, or would it be about the international global conscience about regarding Kashmir? We don't see that happening. Interestingly, some of the Gulf states have been investing in India, and there wasn't much very clear stance from some of the Gulf states for that matter. How do you see this equation going on between the Gulf states, European nations, as Mr. Aslam is saying, the state to state, I would assume, level communication?
I think they have different, each has different motivations for this duplicity vis-a-vis India. Let's take America, for example, which is the preeminent power economically and militarily. America's interest with India is a strategic interest, which they have outlined in many of their policy documents, which is to counter China and the rise of China. And they see India as a natural partner, as a strategic partner. That is why they continue to support the Indian government's actions, despite many people in America raising their voice against Indian atrocities and actions in Kashmir, Indian occupied Kashmir. Europe is different. Europe has a more of an economic interest with India. They have built partnerships with India over several years. Europe is also more, European governments have generally been, some of them especially, have been more anti, let's say, anti-immigrant, anti-Islam, anti-terrorism in that sense. So there is this some kind of connect there. But preeminently, I think it is economically driven. Europe gets a lot of business from India. They sell their arms and ammunition. France is a key example of the kind of deep diplomatic and military ties that Europe is building with India. Then the Middle East and Gulf countries are different because they have a long-standing relationship with Pakistan as well. But today, let's not forget that there are several million Indians that work in the Gulf countries, that are an important part of their economy, that run businesses in the Gulf countries. And so we're seeing these Gulf countries create, again, a new sort of relationship with India. Unfortunate as it is, this is a reality. And what it means for Pakistan is that we have to, again, emphasize within Pakistan the importance of, restarting, re-energizing our economy and creating a more prosperous Pakistan. Because with prosperity comes national security, and with prosperity comes heft abroad. So we need to focus more and more on our own economic prosperity and our own social prosperity and the prosperity of our people to be able to compete globally and internationally, and to be able to defeat this duplicity that we're seeing. And we have to play within this. The Prime Minister Imran Khan has highlighted at the UN this duplicity, and at many forums we continue to highlight this duplicity. But to expect any major policy shifts from European Western countries, I think is a little is not likely.
Not likely in the short term, let's say, or can we
term.
do something about this or work on this in the long term, Mr. Aslam? Because some people are of the view that having a more comprehensive diplomatic plan about this Kashmir policy would help Pakistan. Diplomatically, we have been very active recently, but what do you think that in terms of diplomacy we should do to counter this propaganda that is going on in India and elsewhere in the world, Europe for that matter?
We have had a tendency of just aligning with one power bloc and so to say putting our eggs in one basket. We needed to, over the years, concentrate on building stronger partnerships with a number of countries. We live in a very tumultuous neighborhood. We need to build a stronger partnership with countries like Iran, the Russian Federation, China, of course, we have very strong ties, because it is important to strike that balance. One, the United States, although for the foreseeable future it will remain the main, strongest, principal military power, it's no longer the primary holder of the position of economic global power. China is now, if it has not already taken over in a number of areas, it's very close, it's catching up, and it's still an expanding and growing economy, while the US is facing economic difficulties. Their infrastructure domestically is crumbling, although their military industrial complex is still very strong. But besides that, we know that US has a number of interests in the region. Obviously, China, Russian Federation, Iran, and I have no hesitation in saying Pakistan. They don't see you through the same prism as we have been used to seeing them, that we are an ally, and it was not, and it is not, and it cannot be a natural partnership. We have very few convergences on global issues. So, we need to diversify, we need to stabilize our internal situation. Unfortunately, it seems that the state of Pakistan is sometimes working at cross purposes. We need, I think, as much as we have external threats, we have internal threats. We need to stabilize the situation, economy as well, and economy has to be more indigenously driven policies. Less and less reliance on IMF. We have been able to, the Prime Minister has put in a lot of effort, he has international credibility, our ease of, we have made huge strides in jumping up the ladder of ease of business. If we could attract more investment in Pakistan, in Pakistani infrastructure, of course CPEC is there, but we need more investment here. It could be in energy, it could be in value addition, boosting our industry.
Right.
So, if we do that, obviously we will have a much better chance of being a country to be taken more seriously.
Seriously, right. We'll take a break at this point and we'll continue our discussion after this break. Stay with us. Welcome back. We are discussing Pakistan-India relations and primarily Kashmir, the issue of Kashmir, as I said earlier in my introduction and in the discussion, that the curfew continues in Kashmir. Hospitals have been attacked, ambulances have been attacked, and this goes on in Indian-occupied Kashmir. The curfew goes on in Indian-occupied Kashmir. While this is happening in Kashmir, Pakistan has taken an initiative to open the Kartarpur corridor in Punjab, where the Sikh pilgrims will be visiting their religious site, their sacred site in the Pakistani Punjab. Today, they are visiting the sacred site. And Prime Minister Imran Khan has said that the Indian pilgrims don't need passports, they don't need the visa fee. This is a gesture that Pakistan has taken, a peace gesture to show that we stand for peace and stability with our neighbors, with the pilgrims as well. Hassan, talking about this gesture, this peace initiative taken by Pakistan, initially we saw that Indian government was pretty reluctant in attending even the ceremony of this Kartarpur corridor. Now let's see, there are reports that some of their high officials might be attending this opening, which is taking today, and of course this will continue on the 9th. They would be coming. How do you see this initiative, first of all, as a peace gesture from the Pakistani side?
I think it's a very important initiative. I think it highlights how Pakistan is, a lot of people talk about minorities in Pakistan, and I think the Kartarpur initiative itself is a great demonstration of how Pakistan is open for all minorities and goes out of its way for the Sikh community, not only in Pakistan and India, but across the world. Because every community, every religion should have the right to attend and have pilgrimage to their most sacred sites. So I think this initiative for the Sikh community in India, Pakistan, in the subcontinent and all over the world, I think is an extremely important initiative by Pakistan. It also demonstrates that we are willing to work towards peace and stability in the region and work towards positive outcomes. Unfortunately, there has been very little reciprocity from India, also on the Kartarpur initiative. Right. This is entirely an initiative from Pakistan. But the Indians have tried, and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has tried to portray this as if his government has taken this initiative. That's not true.
And that too now in last 2-3 days, I would
Yes,
say.
so that's
They're
not
trying to
true
do
at
it.
all. Pakistan has invested in opening this corridor. Pakistan has opened its borders for free movement, despite India blocking hundreds of pilgrims from Pakistan, denying them visas to go to Ajmer Sharif, for example, or go to Nizamuddin Aulia's Mazar in Delhi. And this is an old, there was an old agreement between India and Pakistan
74.
in 1974 to allow religious pilgrimage on both sides of the border. Pakistan has stood up to that agreement, but India has changed the goalposts on allowing pilgrims. In fact, India has gone so far as to stop Sikh jathas that come through Wagah to Pakistan for pilgrimages to Nankana Sahib, etc. They have gone so far as to stop them and not giving them NOCs to apply for visas to Pakistan. So that shows the difference in the two governments and in the two thinkings that we are seeing in South Asia. Now we hope that there is reciprocity. Now that Pakistan is opening the Kartarpur initiative, we hope that there is greater reciprocity from the Indian government. It is very unlikely. It doesn't seem as if they are willing to open or create some kind of equal reciprocity to the Kartarpur initiative. Pakistan has also tried to use to say that during the Kartarpur opening, etc. We tried if we could have some kind of meeting between officials and try and see if there were prospects for normalization of the bilateral relationship. This is before the 5th of August. Let me remind the audience, this is before the 5th of August. Pakistan wanted to use this initiative to see if there were prospects for bilateral talks, etc. But I think that was scuttled by the Indians. There was a lot of fear in India that this gesture, they were looking at it from a very negative point of view. So Pakistan has been very open in its approach. That we haven't seen the same from India.
And Mr. Aslam, many people are of the view that even now the Indian government, BJP, has sort of taken this initiative or reciprocating in some way, though in a very lukewarm way, that too reluctantly. Do you see it that way? Because there is also this internal rift that is going on between Indian Punjab and Delhi, and a lot of pressure on the BJP government from the Punjab constituency. How do you see these dynamics?
Yes, India agreed to this very reluctantly, and for them, apart from Hindus, India has no place for any other religion. And Hassan was saying rightly that they have been in violation of a bilateral agreement that worked for decades very well about the pilgrims' visit to holy sites from both sides. While we never stopped issuing visa or facilitating the pilgrims who came from not just Sikhs but also Hindus who came to the some of their holiest sites here, we even not only allowed but permitted when Mr. Jaswant Singh was allowed to go to Balochistan. He, I think, came 2 or 3 times there with a group. And obviously it has to be seen in the context of how they look at every other religion or any differences. And also for them even matters as sacred as pilgrimage is politicized. Secondly, they think that somehow if when they agreed, they were reluctant because they thought that somehow this could strengthen the Sikh identity, because Sikhs from Canada and other places who fled the Indian atrocities in the 80s, they also come here, and they thought that people getting together, it may rekindle the Khalistan movement. We have handled it with, we have been very generous, our government has been very generous, but we should keep in mind that security is an important aspect. while it is a welcome gesture that we are facilitating them, fees are existent, and also movement and accessibility is unhindered. Um, some checks are necessary. I do not think, I have absolutely no doubt that India would use this free flow of people from India to infiltrate terrorists. They have missed no opportunity. They have done it through Afghanistan, through Iran, from wherever they could do it. So how are they going to miss an opportunity where it's just crossing over? Identity can be anything, it can be fabricated. After all, Gulbharshan Jadeh was carrying different identities. So we need to also keep the very important aspect of our security in mind, because India is has been, and presently it is, and will continue to sponsor terrorism in Pakistan, as it has done in Sri Lanka and many other countries in this region. So I don't agree with the kind of complete open access without checks that has been granted. Otherwise, it's a great gesture, and it is in keeping with our values and culture.
Right. Hassan, what do you think about this? Because of course, we should be on our guard. We welcome our Sikh guests who are here in Pakistan, who are visiting Kartarpur Sahib, and they can come here, they can visit Pakistan on pilgrimage. Our people go there, and as you were mentioning earlier, we rather should be going there, because if we are inviting them and if we are allowing them to come over here, we should also be allowed to go over there. But staying on guards, that is something very important. Our security, that too, and also a lot of people in Pakistan, regionally too, they are skeptic about BJP's stance on this, the way people are moving freely, as Ambassador Aslam was saying. What do you think about this?
I think the BJP resisted this tooth and nail till the end, till it became, because it involved the sentiments of the Sikh community going to their holiest Gurdwara. So, and because it was the 550th, anniversary of Guru Nanak, it was very difficult for the BJP government to backtrack from this initiative that Pakistan had given to the Sikh community. So I think they tried their best. They tried to create hurdles, on issue of fees, etc., on modalities. They tried their best to make it very difficult to open this corridor, but Pakistan has gone out of its way. I'm sure and I hope that security initiatives are in place to ensure that the best possible security can be provided around the corridor area. But nevertheless, we must be very cautious and careful in this time and age. I think the other issue, Taimur, which I would like to highlight is that we should be very careful, because India has always argued diplomatically that we will talk about all other issues except Kashmir. And they have tried over several years to convince Pakistan and to create an environment in which Pakistan is forced into a position where it talks about other issues, smaller issues, and India avoids talking about Kashmir. So for us, it's very important that going forward, this is one-off initiative. We should be very clear that this is a one-off initiative from our side for the Sikh community in the Sikh religion, but that this should not be taken in India as a precedent for, and they have a history of making precedents out of small issues, and very famously so is the issue of meeting the Hurriyat leadership in Delhi by visiting Pakistani dignitaries, which they sort of tried to make it into a precedent. So I think we should be very careful that this is a one-off initiative, and that any other conversations or any other initiatives will only come when a full spectrum of bilateral issues are brought onto the negotiating table, including, very importantly now, more important than ever, Kashmir. And there we have seen a great reluctance from India. In fact, they have used very aggressive language over the last couple of months, against Pakistan. They've talked about taking back Azad Kashmir and Gilgit-Baltistan. According to them, taking back Azad
Their
Kashmir.
ministers for that matter.
Their ministers, their army chief, and others. You know, and it's not just statements, but you know, they're also holding some important meetings. For example, 3-4 days ago, the defense minister met with all 3 services chiefs to talk about the situation with Pakistan. Now, why the Navy chief had to go there should raise alarm bells in Islamabad. So, they're being very aggressive with Pakistan, and Pakistan is taking these positive stances, but we must be on our guard, as Ambassador Aslam pointed out earlier.
Right. And Ambassador Aslam, concluding remarks, this propaganda from the Indian side, you are a diplomat, senior diplomat, we want to talk, let's say. Now, if we want to talk, we want to have a solution to this issue that is going on, and primarily Kashmir, because we are concerned about the people of Kashmir, the way they are being attacked and brutalized in Indian-occupied Kashmir. But India doesn't want to talk. Whenever we want to talk about talks, they talk about terrorism. They equate that thing with terrorism, and they have been rather trying to sell it to the rest of the world. How do we counter this propaganda, and do you see talks coming somewhere in future, or do you think that this propaganda, Indian propaganda, would continue?
Obviously, Indian propaganda would continue, but they have milked this cow to death. No pun intended here. You would have seen at the recent hearing on the Capitol Hill, the Congress members very clearly said that Indians say that Pakistan is sending terrorists, and they said we have no evidence. So, it's in a long time that the clarity about what is happening in Kashmir is it is gaining ground, and people are becoming aware that terrorism is being used to suppress Kashmiris, and it's Pakistan has not, and Pakistan cannot, because we came under pressure, and I think we also were on the defensive, that we allowed a major material change in the state of Jammu and Kashmir, which the UN Security Council resolutions require Pakistan, India not to make, and even similar agreement, if we are to mention that, that there will be no material change. But this fencing along the LOC, which is blatant violation of the UN Security Council resolutions, and turning it into a kind of international border. We allowed that because India was saying there is infiltration, terrorists are coming in. So, we said, okay, if you are building a fence, if you are putting up these searchlights and Kashmir is being barricaded, do it, because then at least you cannot turn around and claim that there is infiltration. They have done that, but they are still leveling these allegations, and over the years, without any evidence, countries like the US or France, they were backing Indian position that yes, there is, because if you don't tarnish the Kashmiri movement, you have to take a position. And secondly, for a number of other reasons, Pakistan has to be put under pressure. So, that is why it was happening. I don't see any, and if talks begin, and when and if, Pakistan is equally, if not more, interested in talking about terrorism, because we have faced sustained terrorism from India. Thirdly, I don't see any possibility of talks, and mercifully our government and officials have also stopped repeating it now, that we want talks, we want to peace in the region, because it's you are in a way demeaning yourself. You know that there cannot be any talks, India is not willing to talk. They think they will bring about some changes on ground and then present it as a fait accompli. Fine, if you want to go there as a supplicant, that okay, we accept what you have done, but now have mercy, don't invade us, and have good relations with us, we want to be your friends. short of that, you have no possibility of talks in the near future. And in fact, we should be very clear that sooner or later India is going to indulge in some misadventure. Are we ready for that? We need to think about it.
Hassan, you have a point?
Yeah, two quick points, Taimur, about what's happening in Kashmir. Now, let's remember that India, you know, how there was a major insurgency, freedom rights movement in the 90s.
Right.
And the National Security Advisor of India today, Ajit Doval, was the head of the Intelligence Bureau in the 90s in Kashmir. And he adopted a strategy, which I think they're doing again, to malign the freedom fighters in, in Kashmir, which was to use groups in Kashmir, pay them mercenaries to kill, you know, random people, kill Kashmiris also, and create this environment of fear and say, look, there's terrorism happening. They even kidnapped foreign mountaineers. That group particularly.
Jamaat
Al-Farah.
Yeah.
So I think what we've seen in the last 3-4 days is that what the Kashmiris have done very smartly is that they have gone into civil disobedience mode. They're not opening their shops, they're not going on the streets, their kids are not going to school. They are demonstrating their resistance. The whole community is demonstrating their resistance and their rejection of India's annexation of Indian occupied Kashmir. But what we've heard recently are these you know, selected murders of non-Kashmiris happening. And I fear that India is adopting, Ajit Doval is adopting his old strategy again in Kashmir to malign the Kashmiri freedom movement, because they've not been able to prove terrorism and they've not been able to label this as a terrorist movement. This is purely an indigenous freedom movement for the right of self-determination. So I fear the Indians are now trying to adopt that old strategy once again by using mercenaries. And many, we've heard reports of many, you know, goons from rest of India also being shipped to Kashmir. We don't know who they are. They may be doing
RSS,
acts of
RSS.
Especially now it is easier for them to change the demographics.
So I think this is a very serious issue and concern. We should highlight this. The second, I think, important element here is that we must be very careful. When we talk about Kashmir, human rights issue is certainly preeminent. It's a major issue for us. But we must not forget that the disputed nature of Kashmir is also an important element. And when we try and promote, when we talk about international community that is talking about Kashmir, whether in Congress and others, we must be careful, because many people abroad tend to present this as a human rights issue within India. It's not. It's a human rights issue in a disputed territory, where Pakistan has all kinds of legal, moral, historical, religious standing in Indian occupied Kashmir, and we must keep emphasizing this point. Our argument should not only be a humanitarian argument. Our argument must also be a legal argument, and our argument must also be a diplomatic argument. So going forward, I think these two things are very important.
Right. Thank you so much for joining us, Ambassador Aslam. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for your time. Hassan Akbar, pleasure having you on the show. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for your time. That's all from today's show. We welcome our Sikh guests who are visiting Pakistan, Kartarpur Sahib today. And this is an initiative, a gesture from the Pakistani side that we stand for peace and stability. But if there is any sort of misadventure from the Indian side, Pakistan is ready to pay back in the same coin. Thank you for watching today's show. See you next time. Khuda Hafiz.